Hi, this is Officer Michael Shelton from the St. Louis County Police, and you are listening to 102.9 FM.
Business. Here we go. We're going to have fun.
Are you all ready?
We are
Fun to
all
talk
ready.
with you. That's why.
The Women in Business Show, brought to you by Promo Experts. Promo Experts is a one-stop, full-service marketing company that can help you get noticed with top-notch creative graphic design, marketing strategy, video production, digital marketing, and promotional products to move you forward. Okay, audience, here's your host of the Women in Business Show, Diane Carson.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to the show. My name is Diane Carson, and I am the host of the Women in Business Show on KWRH 92.9 FM and the owner of, and KXOK, I forgot to mention that one, and the owner of Promo Experts, a marketing, public relations, and promotional distribution company. This show airs on KWRH 92.9 FM and KXOK 102.9 FM on Sunday at noon and streams daily on My Genre Radio through Zeno FM. Each week, we interview a successful woman business owner or an expert, we have a real expert today, who can provide advice to the women business owner listeners, providing them insight into their business, or to women business owners who are just starting a business, thinking about leaving their corporate jobs to enter the world of entrepreneurship, or who want to move their business or professional life to the next level. We hope you'll gain at least one good nugget, in quotes, that you can put into practice in your business or professional life immediately. Today, my guest is Dr. Amy Narishkin. She is the Chief Executive Officer of Empowering Partners, LLC. Before we chat with Amy, here's a little bit about her background. To achieve true return on investment and an engaging place to work, leaders must create a culture of safety and belonging. With a PhD in adult education and 30 years experience in teaching, consulting, managing, and research, Dr. Amy Narishkin is a thought leader, a strategist, and a consultant who helps organizations make the shift to cultural intelligence. Dr. Amy works with CEOs, management teams, and those who take the lead in organizations to effectively implement the tools for CI, collaboration and innovation, for growth. Dr. Amy is also a certified administrator for the Intercultural Development Inventory, the IDI. As a cross-cultural talk leader and a very successful entrepreneur, Amy coaches both individuals and organizational teams to create exciting, culturally intelligent places to work and interact. So let's welcome Amy to the show. Welcome, Amy. Good to have you today.
Thank you, Diane.
Happy Valentine's Day.
To you as well.
And Amy brought me a beautiful plant and chocolate, so I'm going to enjoy that. So tell me, what is cultural intelligence?
Cultural intelligence, quite simply, is what enables us to be able to talk with just about anyone.
And you can, for sure. So
I can talk with just about anyone.
anybody, yes.
I'll give it my best
Absolutely.
shot. I'll give it my best shot.
Okay, so can you explain a bit more about the 5 elements of the 5 C's of cultural intelligence?
Absolutely. One of the things that I've discovered in this work, talking with people that are different, is that there's some stages or phases that I have to go through. The first one, to talk with someone who's different, and different can be someone that looks different or seems different from a different perspective, different cultural background. I need initially curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not curious about a person, their experiences, then there's no point in engaging with them.
Right.
But one of the things that Americans are known for is kind of coming in hot with our curiosity. We'll ask questions, and sometimes that can come across as intrusive. So one of the other things that I've discovered that I need to do is slow it down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I call that contemplation. Just take a moment, take a breath, because in that moment, you're going to think that, wait, this isn't just about me and my curiosity. This is about the other person. and I can potentially center the conversation on them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I might need a moment. Is that also takes courage when you're getting to know somebody and centering the conversation on them. You might not know where the conversation is going to go,
Mm-hmm.
and that takes a little bit of courage. You put yourself out there, right? And part of the reason it takes some courage is you get to learn about their context, their circumstances, which could be quite different from
Mhm.
yours. And it's when you hear the story that often we bump into compassion for them.
Right.
So often when we're talking with somebody that's different from us or seems strange or odd or bizarre, like, whoa, we kind of want to back off with all our judgment. But if we can slow it down and take a breath, we might learn about their experience. And that's kind of the connecting point with someone.
Right, because we're all a product of our upbringing, I guess, and our backgrounds all make us, who we are.
Yeah.
I mean, it always has some kind of an effect on
Yeah.
it.
Well, and that effect can be a barrier. I was
Mhm.
actually doing, you mentioned in the introduction that I do the intercultural development inventory with people. I do a debrief with them after they take the IDI. And I did a debrief this morning with a young lady, and she was concerned about how judgmental she is when she's moving into conversations with people that are different. And I said, absolutely, good on you. And she's like, what? Oh, wait, aren't I supposed to stop being judgmental? And I'm like, no, we can't. To your point, Diane, we are the product
Mhm.
of how we were raised, of our cultural container. And so you actually need to have your preferences.
Mhm.
How do you pick a spouse or your friends, right? If you don't have your preferences.
Mhm.
What that can do, though, is if you allow it, it can cause a barrier.
Mhm.
So if you can feel your judgment and notice your hesitation and love you for it,
Mhm.
and also in that second step, go, hey, and kind of check, am I safe? And if you're safe, maybe you could proceed, move into a conversation with somebody that's different and learn something,
Okay.
which is kind of cool.
So when you say different, you mean different backgrounds, different from another country, from explain different.
Exactly. Different background, different thought process, different race, different generation,
Okay.
different orientation, different
Right.
religion.
Right.
However you define different.
Mm-hmm.
For some organizations, they want to diversify, and they're talking about racial differences. They
Mhm.
want to include people from different races. Others want to diversify generation-wise.
Mhm.
They don't. Maybe it's all older people, and they haven't embraced Gen Zs,
Right.
for example.
Right.
So-
Yeah. Well, I know from my own experience when I first came over here as a teenager, and people would say to me, "Oh my goodness, you speak English."
Hmm?
Well, I'm from England. What did you think I spoke? So my mother would run into all kinds of different situations where words were, for instance, we moved into some brand new apartments, and it was the day after we were in there, and the gas man, I guess, came to check out, the boiler or something, and she was still in her robe, and she came down. It was a townhouse. She came downstairs, opened the door, and said, "Oh, you knocked me up."
Oh my goodness. Oh my
And
goodness.
he dropped his bag and ran.
I
And
bet
he
he
came back with the apartment manager, and she said, "Honey, what did you say to that man?" She said, "Well, I told him he knocked me. He
Oh no.
knocked me up."
Oh.
And he said,
There's
"You
a
better."
wonderful opportunity to be curious.
There you go. And he said, so she said, she laughed and said, "Well, he came not banging on my door and said, 'You have to come with me. There's some crazy woman over there accusing me
Gosh.
of something."
Of
So-
sexual assault. Wait, I think he just knocked on the door.
Exactly. And that means exactly that. If you're in bed or you're just getting up, and someone comes early, then that's what that is. So
They're knocking you up.
yeah, we had a lot of
That's a
different,
lovely example of a different way of thinking about things.
different scenarios. So how did you get started in this work?
I started in this work, well, you remember August 2014 here in St. Louis, Michael Brown
Mhm.
was killed. And I actually wasn't in town. Like your mother, I am married to a foreign-born national. And Cyril's my husband, he lives in France. And he's originally from France, and all of his family is there. So on the 75th anniversary of D-Day, we went to France to recognize and celebrate the accomplishments of his grandfather, who was part of the French resistance. And he was assigned a battalion of American troops and had to get to the coast to to fight alongside, to translate for them. And obviously the Nazis had confiscated all the cars. And so he and his two oldest daughters, Cyril's aunts, rode for the beaches in Normandy. What was supposed to be kind of just a bike ride, we ended up, I have 4 children, and so there's 6 of us joined 25 French cousins, and we reenacted that bike ride.
Wow.
And so, and of course we were the Americans, right? And reminded all week long. Well, that the 75th anniversary of D-Day was in 2014. Obviously D-Day was in June, but the family could make it happen in August. So when we got back, just in time for school to start, it was August 12 or something. Maybe school started on the 13th. And a friend of mine called me and said, you know what's going on in Ferguson, right? And I'm jet lagged getting my kids in school. I'm like, no, what's going on? And she told me about the protesting that was going on. Had no idea. Spent the next 2 days bringing myself up to speed. And on Saturday morning, at that point, I had a high schooler and a middle schooler. My 2 older were off the payroll. And Christopher and Chloe, as they got up, I said, how are you guys talking about this in school? What's going on? And for me, I'm a career-long educator. This is like a teachable moment. This is a really cool opportunity to come to appreciate other people's lived experience, what it's like for them. And neither of my kids knew what I was talking about. The protesting during the day, some rioting at night had been going on for over a week.
Wow.
And my kids didn't know what was going on. I started bringing him up to speed. Cyril walks by and he plops his tablet in my lap. He reads Le Figaro, which is a newspaper in Paris, to keep up his French, of course. And on his tablet, it's front page news in Paris, what's going on.
Oh, yeah.
And my kids didn't know what was happening, which was quite strange to me. Kind of made me angry, but I brought him up to speed. And by Monday morning, I'd kind of gotten over myself and I realized, wait, I can help out with this. Facilitating conversations. I've done it all my career. Called the schools. And what was interesting is they didn't really want anything to do with me.
Wow.
I kept getting referred up the ladder in the district. And it turns out that there was a gag order over schools in the St. Louis metro area, which is really confusing to me. So I called a gentleman that's a friend of mine from my PhD program at UMSL. He is a Black man and a pastor in North City. And he and I obviously went way back because we did school together. And I said, Pastor Julius, what's going on? Why won't anybody talk with me? I'm not from St. Louis. And he said, Amy, frankly, my white friends won't talk with me either. I said, well, what about within your community? And he said, well, of course we're talking about it, but we're so accustomed to tragedy. And that dichotomy was striking to me. And I just wondered what was up. Being from the coasts, people don't have any problem talking about differences, but it seemed quite different here in St. Louis. And as Pastor and I started talking, now our conversation is going to a whole new level because we're talking about race, and we have a lot in common in that we have religion in common, and we're both educators, and we're both interested in being authentic and real with people. So it was natural for us to take our conversation, and we started talking weekly. And we ended up writing, what I told him about the gag order over the schools, and we ended up writing an article, an op-ed piece for the Post-Dispatch called How to Start the Conversation, with conversation starters at the end of the article. And of course, being a pastor, he said, let's pray over it. We prayed over it and slowly got it out to the schools, and we got calls that it was helping. But it was in that context we started cross-race discussions and in the community. And he said, I'll do this with you, Amy, but you've got to bring the white people.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hard pressed to find white people at first. The people that were actually most interested were people like you and your mom, foreign-born nationals, who had already crossed a culture, and was bridging culture all the time. It was those folks, those white folks, who could appreciate that racial differences are cultural differences, but with a power differential.
Right.
It was their willingness that helped us get the attention of more whites. And we ended up having those conversations for 3 years together.
Wow.
In that context, I began to watch what it took, or I should say, I began to notice what it took to help people feel comfortable and safe talking with people that are so very different, both blacks and whites. And that was the beginning of my journey. Of course, the educator is always looking through those lenses, and I noticed a curriculum in that work.
Right. So you put one together.
So I put it together, and that's actually
the
elements of what I'm teaching now in corporations.
That's an amazing story. So how does it impact an initial conversation then?
When somebody has cultural intelligence, is using those 5 C's. They notice their curiosity. And what's important when you're meeting somebody for the first time and you don't know their context, you got to slow it down. My husband, like I told you, wasn't born in the United States. So he has, he's always interested in talking with people who have different backgrounds. So when he hears an accent, he just gloms right onto them, right? But the thing is, when he came to the U.S. to go to university, he worked hard to develop an American accent. So he looks like a white guy with an American accent. And historically, when white people are asking immigrants or people of color questions, that can be a little suspect, particularly a white man. If you just think about it, historically, if people of color, if Hispanics are asked, they could be deported.
Right.
If African Americans are asked, they could lose their children. Not that Cyril would do anything like that, but that's the history that sits behind us. And so we get to be aware of our context when we're approaching somebody. So Cyril noticed, because of this work that I'm doing, and he's doing too, because we're in it together.
Sure.
He said, why do sometimes people pull back when I ask a question? And I explained, because of the context of our history, people might be scared of you initially in a conversation. He said, well, what can I do? Because I really want to talk to people. He's highly social. He's one of those people who've never met a stranger,
Never met
right?
a stranger, right?
Exactly. And I said, why don't you share a little bit of your context? Just a little bit. Like, I didn't grow up in the U.S. I grew up in Rotterdam and Rio de Janeiro, and all of my family's in France. Would you mind if I ask where you're from? And he's discovered, just by sharing a little bit about his context.
Kind of opens a window or a door.
Yeah. Well, because he's made himself a little bit vulnerable.
Right.
And one of the things that I gently encouraged, if somebody doesn't want to engage with him, let it go.
Right.
It's okay. But 99% of the time, people want to talk. They just need to have a little bit, like you said, a bridge, an entry point.
Absolutely.
Thank
So
you.
how does it impact an established relationship?
Oh, well, let's just talk about my husband again. One of the things that I get to do is recognize, with cultural intelligence, I'm always learning. Cultural intelligence isn't something you have, it's something that you grow.
Develop.
Yeah, just like our intellect and our emotional intelligence and that gut feeling. Cultural intelligence is something you grow, which means I'm always learning. I'm always learning how what I say lands on other people. So even in an established relationship, like between two spouses, my husband and I have been married for, I don't know, 34 or something.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you.
great.
34 years. I'll even ask, I'll say something and I might say, I came in hot. How did that land? And he'll go, most of the time he'll say, oh, that's cool, we're good. But every once in a while he'll go, yeah, it didn't land so well. And I'm like, can I have a do-over? And he'll go, yeah, sure. And I've discovered that, so that pastor that I had the initial conversation with, that's my church now.
Mhm.
And if you can't tell, I'm a white woman, I'm a 57-year-old white woman, and I go into his black church.
Mhm.
And sometimes I come in with all my white culture, and I come in hot.
Mhm.
And I have still an opportunity to say, okay, what was the impact of my words? I have no idea how that landed on you. And pastor will sometimes say, it's okay, Amy, I know your heart.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's what helps kind of in an established relationship. Relationships aren't something that just are. You're either creating them or destroying them.
Mhm.
So I'm always working to.
So it's the way you say something and how a person would take it. Is that
Yeah.
really kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
exactly it. Checking your impact is probably the number one skill, particularly when you identify with a dominant culture.
Right.
You
And is that the
need to
same
ask.
in an organization then? If some people are lean one way and some people is that how that works in an
Yeah.
organization?
So the difference in an organization is now you've got established relationships. What you can do next is start to pick up on patterns.
Mhm.
When you're talking, now you've got this skill set to talk with people that are different. So
Right.
for example, I'm working with a hospital group right now, and their staff is the nursing staff is predominantly women of color.
Mhm.
And one of the things that the leaders, which are predominantly white leadership, they've discovered that when they're doing their rounds,
Mm.
they sit down and hear people out
Mm.
and listen.
Mm.
And they start to pick up on patterns. And, one person complains, it's one person. You feel with them, you affirm them, and I get it. That's got to be tough. And then after you hear it from a couple of people, 3-4 times, that's potential for a change in practice or policy.
Mm.
So what we're looking to do is to create ultimately culturally intelligent organizations where everyone in the organization feels valued and heard at every level.
Mhm. And listened to, I guess. Everybody
Valued,
wants to be
heard, seen,
Right,
and engaged.
Right.
If you want to take care of clients, you got to take care of your colleagues.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what's really nice is when you're doing those surveys to see if people are feeling valued in the organization, and you've got senior leadership walking around, even if it's once a month when they're
Mhm.
doing their rounds and really hearing
Mhm.
people, actually do a workshop on active listening with cultural intelligence.
Mhm.
So appreciating somebody's context, even if you can't change a practice or policy
I was going to say,
tomorrow.
can you train somebody, to do that? I mean, if they're just
Yeah.
not a listener to begin with, I mean, um,
Yeah, absolutely. It's a skill set.
Right.
And if I can learn this skill set, oh my gosh, anybody can learn this skill set. I thought initially it was just a skill of good listening.
uh-huh.
What I've discovered is it's good listening for their context and also recognizing your own context
Mhm.
so that we can bring down some of those barriers.
Right. Well, I think I've been with my husband for about 20 years, and there are still things I say that he doesn't understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
And then he gets frustrated. I said to him not too long ago, something about the dustbin. And he's like, the dustbin?
What's that?
What is? And I said, the dustbin. And then I finally realized it's the trash can. So
I feel you. I feel you.
I know. And he's like, where did that come from? I said, I don't know.
It's
I
deep
grew up
within.
with it.
There's my
So, yeah.
history. It's just
Right,
popping up.
Right. There you go.
But isn't that interesting? Even after 20 years, you're still learning. There's no bottom
Mhm.
or top to your love.
Right.
You're constantly growing
Right.
in your love for him.
Right.
It's
Absolutely.
beautiful.
Yeah. And even my mother, when my son had a friend over, they ordered a pizza and they were waiting for it. And they were down in the basement playing video games. And she went down there and said, has he been? And my son's friend said, beans? We didn't order any beans.
I get it.
Beans. She said, no, has he been?
How's he been?
Has been.
Isn't that how Americans pronounce it?
Mhm,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. So
That's
he's got
cute. It's a cute
and he
example.
teases her to this day about that. So, yeah. So, does it make it worse to talk about differences? I mean, shouldn't we just talk about what we have in common?
I think that's the inclination in our society to focus on what we have in common. In fact, I was at the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago, and I asked somebody that was sitting next to me, who's actually Muslim,
Mhm.
and I asked, how is this landing on you? So I was using my cultural intelligence. What's the impact of this language? Because a lot of Christians in the room were using language that they're familiar with, but not necessarily a Muslim man. And his answer was, Amy, we all bleed the same color. We all bleed red. And I can appreciate that. And he didn't really answer my question.
Wow.
I found that intriguing response.
Mhm.
He didn't tell me how he felt
Wow.
in the room. And maybe, honestly, he just felt so cool to be in the United States.
Mhm.
He and an imam and the imam's younger brother were there, and originally they're all from Pakistan.
Wow.
So maybe he was just thrilled to be there. But I did find it intriguing that he wanted to focus on what we all have in common. However, when you focus on what we all have in common, you miss the opportunity to really get to know someone and be real with them.
Before we go any further, can you tell us how our listeners can get hold of you? Or get in touch
Absolutely.
with you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. On my website, www.empoweringpartners.com.
Okay.
And you can email me through my website, and I write a blog every month. I sit down.
It's a great blog.
Thank you. And it's awesome because, I'll talk with somebody and I'll mess up and I can go write a blog about it. So
Super. Okay, so we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back after the break.
Do you want to become a radio show host, or do you want to create a radio show? Well, Dr. Stan Fine can help you to have your own radio show and put you on 100 cities daily across the U.S. And you can immediately start recording from a live radio studio. As a radio industry veteran, Dr. Stan Fine has 12 years of experience and has produced and hosted over 1,000 radio shows with over 10 million listeners. Dr. Stan Fine knows how to make this happen for you. He's a pro, and he can turn your dreams into a reality. Dr. Stan Fine will help you with everything from learning how to promote your show, develop a host persona, interview techniques, market your show on social media, teach you how to get guests and sponsors, and more. Dr. Stan Fine can put you on the air nationwide daily to 100 cities. If you're interested in making your dream come true, if you want to see how it all works, then give Dr. Stan Fine a call at 314-710-8413. That's 314-710-8413. You've got nothing to lose, and Dr. Stan Fine can help make your nationwide radio dreams come true.
Hey, listeners, saying thanks to your customers is nice and polite, but expressing your gratitude in memorable and ongoing ways can boost your business. At Promo Experts LLC, we exceed our customers' expectations. For over 20 years, our product knowledge and experience has helped them with their marketing initiatives and trade show graphics. We are happy to put that experience to work for you. Quality products, great customer service, and prices are our number one priority. We work with you to find unique, creative, and new ideas that fit your image and expectations, helping you build strong relationships with your customers. When you select Promo Experts as your marketing partner, we help you to see more than the big picture. For more information about this exciting opportunity, contact Diane Carson, President, at 636-458-5241. That's 636-458-5241. Let Promo Experts help you to move your business brand beyond the bland. Have you always wanted to write your own book but don't know where to start? Publishing Concepts, a publishing company located right here in St. Louis, offers everything from consulting, book printing, copyrights, ISBNs and barcodes, print book layout, ebook and iBook layout, graphic design, cover design, ghostwriting, typing and editing, distribution, marketing, and more for an affordable price. Visit publishingconceptsllc.com or just Google Publishing Concepts to get started today, or call 314-781-8880. That's 314-781-8880. Publishing Concepts. We help you sell more books.
If you're looking for a new, informative health and lifestyle show to gain knowledge and inspiration to help guide your journey to think, work, and live more powerfully, then you need to listen to Sage Advice with Melissa. It's live each Thursday from 10 to 11. Now, whether you're trying to improve your life from a mental, physical, or spiritual journey, Sage Advice with Melissa Coleman, CEO of Sage Skincare, delivers weekly advice from industry experts to provide you with insightful suggestions to allow you to thrive with a better quality of life. Melissa's mission? To guide you through the uncharted waters of health and wellness and to give you a voice to help improve your life. So be sure to tune in to Melissa on KWRH 92.9 FM every Thursday at 10 a.m. You'll be glad you did.
Welcome back to part 2 of the show. If you're just now joining us, you're listening to Women in Business. You can catch us locally at KWRH 92.9 and KXOK 102.9 on Sundays at noon, and on My Genre Radio through Zeno FM daily at ZenoFM/St. Louis. Today, we're talking with Dr. Amy Narishkin. She is the CEO of Empowering Partners. And before we go any further, can you please tell us again how our listeners can contact you?
Thank you for asking. You can find me on my website, www.empoweringpartners.com. You can email me from there. You can read my blog and pick up on resources for diversifying your organization.
Great. So during the break, we were talking about the 5 C's,
Mhm.
and you kind of wanted to expand on that. Can you explain what that is, the 5 C's?
Yeah. One of the things that, we actually alluded to it earlier in our conversation, that cultural intelligence isn't something you just have.
Right.
It's something you're constantly developing and growing. If you want to. Not everybody wants to, and that's fine. What intrigues me about the work is that the research goes back to World War II, cultural intelligence, when corporations went multinational, and Shanghai and Sao Paulo and Chicago, for example, all had to learn how to talk and work with one another. So that's where cultural intelligence was birthed. People from different nations needing to be able to function successfully with one another. But I've actually come in through it through domestic differences. And like I alluded to, the protesting that happened in Ferguson in 2014. But because that research was sitting back there, I was intrigued as I was learning how to talk with people that are different and teach that skill set, where this all started. And one of the things that I've discovered in the research is that there are 5 stages of cultural intelligence, and you'll probably recognize them from your own experience as a foreign-born national.
Right.
You'll know these. There's denial, there's polarization, minimization, acceptance, and adaptation. And it's a continuum. So denial isn't necessarily something you're doing intentionally. It's somebody who maybe grew up in a working class community and has never really been exposed to differences. And nobody has shown them how to think outside their own community or
Right.
even their own neighborhood. So
Right.
that's denial, which may not be intentional, and it often isn't. And only about 5% of the population is in denial. You wouldn't necessarily think that, but the next stage is polarization. And polarization definitely are aware of differences, but tend to be judgmental of them. Good, bad, right and wrong, in or out. Only about, we think we're very polarized in society, but it's actually only about 15% of the population around the world are in polarization. Where most of us are is in this middle stage called minimization. It's actually a bell curve. About 15% are in acceptance, and another 4% are in adaptation at the other end. So because 66.8% of the population around the world, and this is based on the IDI, the Intercultural Development Inventory, is the assessment that lets you know where you land on that continuum, where you and your team are. So when I go into an organization and they're wanting to where do I start? How do I start diversifying my organization? Or how do I help my company move internationally and reach a broader market? Well, let's get some empirical data and find out exactly where you all land on that continuum.
Right.
And almost always where a leadership team lands is in minimization. And let me just kind of elaborate a little bit. Minimization isn't intentional. It just is. And it's our cultural default because everybody around us is minimizing. So it might sound like a parent saying to a little one who fell down, "Oh, get up, you're fine."
Mhm.
That's minimization.
Right.
It might sound like you say to your spouse, "This too shall pass."
Mm.
That's minimization.
Right.
You might hear a white person saying, "I don't see color."
Mm.
That's minimization. Of course we see color,
Right.
right? You might hear a man saying to a woman, "That's not sexism, is it?"
Mm.
That's minimization. Anything that downplays somebody's experience based on an assumption
Mhm.
rather than finding out.
Right.
And that minimization is rampant, and it's not intended, but it's where we all live. It's the cultural container that we all live in, and it inadvertently hurts people and it hurts relationships. You can imagine somebody kind of brushing you off and saying, "This too shall pass." It hurts. And so, for example, if somebody, at one point I pointed out that the author of a book was a female author, and the person said, "Oh, I don't pay attention to the gender of the author." And it's kind of like saying to somebody, a man, "I don't see your manhood."
Mhm.
It's just part of who you are, how you identify and how you look. And so we don't want to perpetuate ignoring people's uniqueness. It's a combination of finding out what we have in common and also where we're different. Makes for that beautiful, authentic connection that we're looking for.
Well, I thought it was really great, but the Super Bowl yesterday when they had the all-female pilots flying,
Yeah.
over really what's essentially a male sport. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then they're really trying to be more inclusive, I guess, with
Yeah.
although certainly women are fans, but in
Right.
terms of playing the game or becoming inclusive, I thought it was
It's a perfect example.
yeah.
And some people might say to you as a result, "Why are you pointing out their gender? What does it matter?" Well, what matters is that young girls may not right now be perceiving themselves as able to get into aviation.
Mhm.
But when they see somebody like them,
Right.
it sets in motion
Right. If she can do it, I can do it.
new ideas
Right,
and new
right.
ways of thinking. So if you want a more inclusive organization, and what I mean by inclusive, an organization where people feel like they belong,
Mhm.
we want people in leadership,
Right.
so that people who are kind of boots on the ground work can see and aspire to,
Right.
wow, that's something that I can do one
Right.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Someday I may get there.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, you had an interesting question that you gave me here is how does your work teaching cultural intelligence differ from diversity training?
Oh, that's a great question.
It is.
You
I
get it. I get it. I get it on a regular basis. Well, the first question I get, how can you be
Right.
in diversity, equity, inclusion work? And my first answer is, I actually teach cultural intelligence. I don't do DE&I. So DE&I historically is teaching about the other.
Right.
And I don't teach about the other. What I do is I teach a skill set so that you can talk with just about anyone you perceive to be other. And that's probably the biggest difference. That's why a career-long educator, white woman, cisgendered white woman can do this work, is I can teach you the skills so that you can create an environment where everyone feels like they belong. And that's measurable. And if you get back surveys that people are not feeling valued and heard, that just tells leadership that they need to get out and start finding out what it is that we're missing as a leadership team. So if you've got a predominantly white leadership team, it's okay, and you want to diversify, it's going to take time. We're not just going to be
It doesn't happen
automatically.
overnight.
It doesn't happen
Right.
overnight.
Right.
But that leadership team, if they want to diversify, you can't. The research shows that you can't just diversify an organization visibly without people being able to talk with one another, which is why I have job security, because you're actually going to lower performance if people can't talk with one another about their
Right.
differences.
Right.
But performance actually exceeds expectations, and productivity skyrockets when leaders recognize differences and uniqueness
Mhm.
as an asset.
Mhm.
And it's seen, this is when collaboration and innovation, even profit, skyrocket.
Right.
When people can feel with one another and hear one another out. When people enjoy being at work,
Sure.
they're going to do their best work. When people feel valued and seen,
Right.
that's what upends attrition.
Right. Right.
So
Absolutely. I
cool.
was going to say, otherwise you get people walking out the door if they
Walking out the door.
if they're not happy. And if they don't get along with, whoever it is. So walk me through the process. So you say you get a new client. What happens? You go and sit down with them, and then you obviously talk about cultural intelligence, but will you look at their employee roles and you say, how many different people do you have under your your wing?
The demographics.
Mhm.
Typically, when people are approaching me, they already know their demographics and they're
Okay.
feeling a little self-conscious.
Okay.
So when somebody does approach me and they want to diversify, or they just want to reach a broader market,
Okay.
or they want to create an environment where people want to stick around,
Mhm.
those are different reasons.
Mhm.
We'll have a discovery session, which means we'll probably talk for about an hour, and I'll ask what your goals are.
Mhm.
And it could be that they want to create this environment, or they want to create more equity. They
Mhm.
want to get, they don't want to just attract and retain people of color, but they actually want to promote people of color.
Mhm.
One CEO came to me and he said, Amy, I'm doing everything right. What the research says, we've diversified our board. We're paying our interns now. We're getting feedback from the outside. He said, I just don't understand what we're missing. We're doing everything that the inclusive literature says. And I said, so quick question. And he said, yeah. And I said, could it be that minimization is still rampant in your organization? People are not feeling valued and seen, even though you're going through these appropriate first steps. And he said, I don't know. So that's where we started with the organization. They took the IDI, about 15 leaders, a couple of board members, and their leadership team. They took the IDI, and lo and behold, they discovered that they were in minimization. And when you've got an organization inadvertently practicing minimization, they're maintaining the status quo. And that's what the very thing they were hoping to upend was to create to create a more inclusive space. They were undermining their own efforts with minimization and not acknowledging people's uniqueness, so people weren't feeling valued. After we take the IDI, well, for example, you and your leadership team in your organization take the IDI, and after you take the IDI, we do an hour-long one-to-one debrief so that you learn your stage of development. And what's beautiful is now you know your stage, you know where you are. It's descriptive and it's prescriptive. You know what you're working toward.
Right.
And so does the team of leaders.
Right.
And now they know they're all working toward acceptance. After they take the IDI and have a little bit of conviction
Right.
about with more awareness, then we take that advantage of that conviction, of that awareness, that self-awareness, and we move into 5 workshops. 5 workshops that, I guess I like the number 5. I'm noticing a pattern there. 5 workshops that get people up and talking, because individual conviction can actually shut people down.
Right.
And what I do in these 5 90-minute workshops, I usually teach 1 a week.
Okay. Are they willing participants, or are they just participants have been told we're doing this and so you better be there?
Oh, absolutely, they're willing. In fact,
They
when
are willing. Okay.
a CEO says, I want my entire leadership team to do this, I'll ask them, please don't require it. If you're
Interesting.
not ready to do this work, make it an invitation.
Okay.
And sometimes you might have a one-to-one conversation, and this is why, and explain why you're interested in this work, and this is what I'm hoping to do. You want to take the IDI, see if you even like Dr. Amy. If you don't like,
Right.
bow out.
Okay.
By all means.
Okay.
Don't continue
So
on
it
with
isn't
the work.
mandatory.
No.
Okay.
You got to want to do this work.
Well,
You
yeah.
actually have to be curious about differences
Sure.
and want to embrace.
Right.
But the thing is, if you haven't spent a lot of time being curious and loving on you
Mhm.
and showing compassion for yourself, it's really hard to show compassion for other people.
Absolutely.
So sometimes CEOs bump into an opportunity an employee needs to get with the EAP
Mhm.
and learn how to do some self-care and practice loving on themselves
Mhm.
before they're ready to think about caring
Moving
for.
forward. And
Yeah.
sure. Okay.
Thank you for asking.
Well, I just wonder because when you go in, so one of your questions is how do PR marketing, how do you get clients? How do people find you? And are they at their rope's end and they just think, oh my gosh, I need somebody to come in here and fix this? Or, I'm curious.
So often the CEOs that are interested in this work have been othered at some point in their life. They've lived abroad or
Okay.
they just know what it feels like to feel less than,
Mhm.
and they don't want people in their organizations to feel that way.
Okay.
And they'll hear me at a conference, and I've noticed for my fellow business owners out there that because sometimes I don't sell something that's obvious.
Mhm.
I'm selling something that you kind of have to wrap your mind around.
Mhm.
And so what's best for me is when I'm teaching or facilitating workshops at conferences.
Mhm.
So often in my work, I need the clients those that have burning platforms or people in construction.
Mhm.
They needed people of color and women
Mhm.
yesterday.
Right.
Hospital and healthcare.
Mhm.
They needed women and people of color and people who are neuroatypical and differently abled yesterday.
That's interesting that there are
credit-
certain industries.
Yeah.
Surprised.
Credit unions have to, are bound to serve the community in which they're in.
Right.
So those tend to be my markets, the
Okay.
ones with the burning platforms.
Interesting.
I'm not as interested in working with a company that wants to check a box or just avoid litigation. Your heart's not in it.
Right.
Because I'm typically with an organization for basically an academic year, 8 to 10
That was
months.
going to be my other question.
Yeah.
How long does this take?
You take you and your leadership team take the IDI, then we do the 5 workshops once a week. And then that leadership team breaks into small groups of 4 or 5 people. And that's where the rubber meets the road as they're doing their work, developing their cultural intelligence and practicing,
Right.
air quotes, practicing.
Yeah.
With the people in their organization and doing their rounds. They're picking up on patterns, and it's in those small groups they feel convicted but safe.
Mhm.
A brain tends to freak out when it's more than 8 people in a room and go,
Mhm.
"Wah!" and shut
Mhm.
down.
Right.
So I want a small group of people working together and noticing practices that are not serving the organization.
Mm.
And it's so fun. That's where we get stuff done.
Yeah. I read your blog, and it's actually, speaking of healthcare, it was about a Black doctor, I believe that,
Yeah.
and you had a member of your group. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. It was a white male VP
Mhm.
of the organization, and the doctor had called to complain
About the billboard.
about the billboard
Yeah.
on the
So that was
highway
interesting.
only
Yeah.
having white doctors on it.
Right.
And the VP wanted so much to say, wait, have you seen the other billboards? But he'd been with me now for about 8 months. And he actually called me and he said, I didn't say it, Amy. I didn't try to correct him. And I said, then why are you calling me? And he said, because I don't know what to do. I don't want to
Sure.
screw up with this guy.
Right.
And if marketing needs to do something differently, I'll get after them. But first him. And I actually said to this VP in this executive coaching session, good on you for slowing down. There's the contemplation.
Mhm.
He was curious. He slowed
I thought
down.
it was amazing. Yeah. 'Cause
And he called me.
I know 9 out of 10 people probably would have gone the other route.
Gone the other way.
They probably
And
would.
I kind of, because they're in minimization.
Right.
But he wasn't practicing minimization. He
Right.
knew the doctor was
Right.
in pain and he knew correcting him
Right.
wasn't going to help.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why don't you call him back?
Mhm.
And what was intriguing, he said, but what do I say? And I said, how about, I hear you.
Right.
Can you tell me more about your experience? That's what pushes us out of minimization and into acceptance, is asking a gentle, open-ended question. And you might start with, can I ask you a question? And follow, and once you get their permission, ask, what can I do? What am I missing?
Mhm.
And so the doctor explained that he'd worked extra hard in his specialty area and really wanted to be up on that billboard, really wanted to be seen for the work that he had done in med school. And this VP, Ralph, said, oh, okay, I can do that. And so he called, and I got a text back that from the VP and said, okay, I think it went really well, but I think so. And I said, okay, so this would be a really good time to check your impact.
All right.
See how it landed on him. And he said, can I text him? And I said, whatever's going to build a relationship better.
Mhm.
And he called him.
Mhm.
And so he called him, and he said to the doctor, the conversation, that conversation went well for me, but I don't know how it landed on you.
Mhm.
And that was when the doctor started to open up. It was the second call
Mm.
where the doctor got really real.
Felt more
with him.
comfortable talking about his
Yeah.
experiences. Yeah, that's
When
interesting.
When you've got that power differential between a white and a black, or between a man and a woman,
Mhm.
between a parent or a teacher and a child, there's a power differential. And people who have been historically marginalized are not going to
Mhm.
speak up just because you ask.
Mhm.
A manager to an employee, they're not going to speak up just because you ask.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It might take 2, 3, 4 touches before somebody
Mhm.
can trust you.
Sure. Yeah.
You kind of have to prove yourself when you've got white skin like I do.
Mhm.
When I'm in black spaces, or just spaces where I'm the minority, I recognize that I'm still typically part of the dominant culture,
Mhm.
and I have to pursue that relationship. He pursued that doctor, and it was finally with the third touch that the doctor shared his story. And what was really cool is the VP softened,
Mhm.
and he no longer felt the need to correct the doctor. He understood.
Mhm.
And the doctor now felt heard
Right.
and felt seen. And he said to the VP, thanks for listening.
Interesting.
And then even acknowledged the VP's feelings and said, it must be hard to get complaints all the
Oh,
time.
yeah.
And this is what happens when you center the conversation on the other person.
Mhm.
Make it about them. Feel with them.
Mhm.
Even if you don't want to,
Right.
just, you're the one with a little cultural intelligence.
Mhm.
Make it about them for just a little bit. So often the conversation turns and the love comes
Mhm.
back to you.
Right.
And darn, if that's not so cool to experience that.
Yeah. That's
So then the VP knew exactly what to do when he circled back with marketing. It actually wasn't the external marketing campaign that needed to
it was
change.
the internal.
Internal.
Right.
They hadn't let the
Yeah.
doctors know.
Right.
Hello.
Wow.
But if he hadn't dug down, he wouldn't have found very specifically what needed to be done. Bada bing, bada boom. It's so fun.
So that goes to what new skills would participants walk away from your training with? So obviously this guy he's doing really well. He's obviously learning.
Well,
so-
he's learning. He's also 8 months in.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
One of the skills, I teach the acronym STOP,
Right.
STOP.
Uh-huh.
So that's a skill.
And so
slow
what-
down,
Right.
take a breath,
Okay.
observe your feelings, go inside, got to love you,
Mhm.
and notice your angst or whatever it is you're feeling.
Mhm.
And also notice how the other person is reacting.
Hmm.
And if you're safe, I don't want you to proceed into a conversation that's not safe. You need to be psychologically and physically safe. If you're safe, everything's cool, proceed, the P, with curiosity and wonder. So that's the first skill, is to slow it down and be present. And,
Think about what you're saying, or think.
Yeah.
Think first. Yeah.
and also think, when you slow it down and you take a breath, there's no rush. What's really lovely is you can then, another skill you think about, is this a conversation where I just want to be heard and I want to speak,
Hmm.
or am I listening to understand
Mhm.
their experience?
Right. So some of the clients that you've worked with, do you have to go back after a certain number of years? Because obviously there's a turnover, and does it stay with that organization, or do you find yourself having to go and repeat?
It's actually something that I'm building in my company now, because I've been in business since 2000, for about 8 years,
Uh-huh.
right? Not even. And that's just coming up now.
Okay.
And so building out kind of a curriculum that, for people who've already been there,
Mhm.
a refresher course.
Right.
And another organization asked how they were going to expand it out beyond their leadership team. And so one of the things that I'm bringing into beta testing, I've been working on for 2 years is an online version, a self-study
That would
workshop
be
series.
amazing. Yeah.
So that way it can roll out to thousands of employees.
Right.
The leadership, I prefer to work with the leadership team and really nurture that.
Mhm.
And then they roll out the language and the vocabulary, and they're throughout the organization that way.
Right. So do you, I guess to get back to my question, are there a lot of people that you have to go back to, or do you find it sticks with,
Well, that's what
It does-
I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question. That's what I'm just learning, because I
Okay. Oh,
haven't been in
okay.
business
okay.
for that long.
Okay. Oh, sure. Yeah.
that
Okay.
I'm just discovering that people need refresher
All right.
opportunities.
There you go. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
I would think they would, with turnovers and different
Exactly. Exactly.
employees and different, people being promoted and
Yeah, and new people coming into the organization, which is exactly why I developed the online self-study course, so that at least people would know the language and the vocabulary and the skill set, because I make sure you walk away from every workshop with 2 to 3 new skills
right.
for engaging with people. And if the team has the leadership team, but then they have this new person that comes in and we want to bring them up to speed, they
Right.
can do the self-study course.
Okay. Well,
Thank you for
that's
asking. It's a
great.
really good question.
That's good. So I guess I had one in my mind and I forgot now. But well, I guess I was going to ask. Okay, so tell us a little bit, about your corporate experience. I mean, is this something that you ran into when you were in corporate America, or?
Oh, I love that you think I was in corporate America. No, grew up in a corporate
you were
family.
okay.
No, I have been an educator
Okay.
all my life.
Okay.
And that is actually a distinction. So often when you do have DEI training, they may or may not be educators. So what I'm looking, and that sounded like I was dissing somebody, I apologize. I don't want to just talk to people about how they should be aware of other people. What I'm interested in doing as a career-long educator, and I started with kids in classrooms, and now I work with grown-ups in boardrooms or in lecture halls.
Yeah, I was kind of going to ask you who your ideal client was. So I'm
Yeah.
guessing it's boardrooms at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was your first question though? As an educator, I get to be kind of educator / activist.
Mhm.
And one of the things that educators are required to do, for those of us who are raised up in public school, you're required to reach and teach every kid. And then when I moved to teaching teachers at the university level and teaching them to make sure that everyone was engaged in that classroom and you had 100% participation and that behavior is shifting.
Mhm.
That's what educators are looking for. You know that learning has happened when there's a shift in behavior,
Wow. Yeah.
because somebody can take a workshop, but nothing changes.
Mhm.
And what I want to see is behavior changing so that people walk away from Diane Carson feeling valued and seen, which is what you're doing here, and you're extraordinary at it. And not everybody has that skill set. As an educator, I get to use my skills from working with kids to adults to make sure that people have what it takes to create that environment of belonging. And then you asked me a second question.
I think it was
Oh, the ideal client.
right. But I think you pretty much told us who it was.
Yeah.
It's the boardroom. So
Yeah.
CEOs.
Yeah, people who are wanting to do this work.
All right.
The research shows that people have a lot of interest in diversifying their organization, but they don't know where to start. And I'm like, I know where to start. We'll start with some empirical
I
data.
think it's amazing what you do. So thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you. What an honor.
You provided a whole load of information for our listeners and to think about and to put into practice in their businesses and their corporate careers. So tell our listeners again how they can get hold of you if they're interested.
On my website, www.empoweringpartners.com.
Okay, please reach out to Amy to learn more about cultural intelligence.
And connect with me on LinkedIn.
Okay,
I post a couple, 3 times a week.
Right,
How-tos. for-
Amazing blogs and newsletters. Yeah, it's really.
Thanks to Diane, I'm publishing there too.
And you can reach out to me, Diane, at promoexperts.com for your promotional product needs or just offer feedback about the show. Thank you. Thanks,
you.
Amy.
Thank you.
gone, while the sun is bright, or in the darkest night.